The little girl was barely breathing when he found her, curled near the edge of an abandoned bus stop on the outskirts of town, her skin pale against the cold concrete, her tiny fingers trembling like leaves in a storm no one else could see. Cars passed. People stared. No one stopped. But he did. A poor single father, who barely had enough to feed himself and his son, knelt beside a child dressed in clothes far too expensive for this broken neighborhood. Blood stained the side of her forehead. Her pulse was fading. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her family. He didn't know that powerful men were already searching for her. And he had no idea that saving her life would bring the most dangerous people in the city to his doorstep. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in humanity, and subscribe to Black Voice Story for more powerful stories that reveal truth, injustice, and unexpected courage. Because what happened next would shake an entire city. Marcus Reed had grown used to being invisible. At 34 years old, he carried the exhaustion of someone twice his age. His hands were calloused from construction work that came and went depending on who was willing to hire him that week. Since the factory layoffs 3 years earlier, steady work had been a luxury he rarely tasted. He lived in a small rented trailer at the edge of Crestview, a city sharply divided between glittering high-rises and forgotten neighborhoods. Marcus and his 8-year-old son, Elijah, belonged to the forgotten part. Life had not been kind to Marcus. After his wife passed away from an untreated illness, one that could have been prevented if they'd had proper insurance, he had been left to raise Elijah alone. He learned how to braid hair badly, how to pack school lunches creatively from limited groceries, and how to hide his fear of not being enough. But no matter how hard he worked, doors seemed to close before he could reach them. He was followed in stores, ignored in interviews, passed over for promotions that went to less experienced men with lighter skin. Crestview was polite about its prejudice. It didn't shout slurs. It didn't hang signs. It simply decided who mattered. And Marcus had learned that he did not. That morning had begun like most others, with disappointment. A contractor had told him they went in a different direction. It was the 4th time that month. He walked home under the unforgiving afternoon sun, calculating which bills could wait. That was when he saw her, a small figure near the rusted bus stop bench by the highway. At first, he thought she was sleeping, but something about the stillness felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. People walked past. Some glanced. No one touched her. Marcus hesitated only long enough to set down his worn backpack before kneeling beside her. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her breathing was shallow. A thin line of blood trailed from her temple into her hair. Her clothes, soft linen, designer stitching, polished shoes, did not belong in this neighborhood. He called out for help. No one responded. He checked her pulse. Weak. His mind raced. Ambulances cost money. Hospitals asked questions. And men who looked like him were often treated as suspects before witnesses. But a child was dying. So he picked her up. He carried her 3 blocks to his trailer because it was closer than waiting for emergency services that might never arrive in time. His hands shook as he laid her on his worn couch. Elijah watched in the doorway, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Marcus cleaned the wound gently with the limited supplies he had. He pressed cloth to her head to stop the bleeding. He whispered quiet reassurances, though she could not hear them. Minutes felt like hours. Then she coughed. A faint sound, but alive. Relief flooded him so intensely he nearly collapsed. He had no idea that across town, alarms were ringing inside a mansion surrounded by iron gates. A Billionaire security team had just realized the unthinkable. The only daughter of Victor Langston was missing, and Crestview was about to turn upside down. Victor Langston was not accustomed to losing control. As the CEO of Langston Global Enterprises, his influence stretched across real estate, tech investments, and political campaigns. His face appeared on magazine covers. His donations shaped elections. His name opened doors that remained permanently sealed to others, especially to men like Marcus Reed. When security footage revealed that 7-year-old Amelia Langston had slipped past her assigned guard during a charity gala rehearsal and wandered outside the state grounds, panic erupted. Within minutes, private investigators, local police, and corporate security flooded Crestview. But Amelia was not in the polished districts. She had wandered further than anyone imagined. Back in the trailer, Marcus faced a new problem. The girl began to wake. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Marcus reassured her softly, careful not to overwhelm her. He offered water. He checked her pupils the way he'd once learned in a first aid course years ago. She seemed disoriented, possibly concussed. He made the decision to call an ambulance despite his fears. But before he could dial, a loud knock rattled his trailer door. 3 uniformed police officers stood outside, and behind them, 2 men in tailored suits with earpieces. Their eyes moved past Marcus immediately, scanning the interior. Suspicion filled the air before a single word was spoken. They had received a tip that a child matching Amelia's description was seen near the highway. A witness had described a black man carrying her away. Marcus felt the shift instantly. He was no longer a rescuer. He was a suspect. The officers asked rapid questions. Why was she inside? Why hadn't he reported it immediately? How'd he find her? Why didn't he leave her where she was? Each answer seemed to create more doubt rather than clarity. Elijah clung to his father's leg, terrified. The suited men pushed inside, without invitation. One recognized the designer label on the girl's dress. Everything changed. Suddenly the officer's tone sharpened. Hands hovered near holsters. Marcus was instructed to step back. Amelia stirred and weakly reached toward Marcus, instinctively seeking the only safe presence she had known since waking. But that gesture went unnoticed. Instead, whispers of possible kidnapping began circulating between radios. Within minutes, Marcus was placed in handcuffs in front of his son. The humiliation burned deeper than the metal against his wrists. He tried to explain. He tried to stay calm. But in Crestview, explanations for men like him often fell on deaf ears. The trailer was searched. His phone was confiscated. His neighbors watched. And somewhere across town, Victor Langston prepared to face the media with grief carefully arranged across his expression. At the police station, the narrative formed quickly. A struggling single father. A billionaire's missing daughter. A child found inside his home. The optics were convenient. Marcus sat in an interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lights. He replayed every moment in his mind, wondering if he should have walked past like everyone else. Meanwhile, doctors confirmed that Amelia had suffered a mild concussion from falling against a concrete barrier. She had wandered after becoming overwhelmed at the crowded estate event. When she regained fuller consciousness at the hospital, she became agitated. She asked for the man who carried her, the man with tired eyes, the man who smelled like sawdust and soap. Victor Langston arrived at the hospital in a storm of cameras and controlled panic. But when Amelia saw him, her first question was not about home. It was about Marcus. Confusion rippled through the room. Amelia described how she had been scared and alone, how people walked by, how no one helped, except him. Security footage from nearby traffic cameras was pulled. It showed Marcus kneeling beside her, checking her pulse, looking around desperately for help, carrying her carefully, not hurriedly. The timestamp matched the story exactly. The narrative collapsed, but damage had already been done. Marcus was released hours later without apology. No charges, no explanation, just a quiet dismissal. When he stepped outside the station, media cameras were waiting. They had been fed the initial suspicion, not the correction. Flashes exploded in his face. Questions accused rather than inquired. He shielded Elijah from the chaos. Then something unexpected happened. Victor Langston stepped forward, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a father. He publicly acknowledged that Marcus had saved his daughter's life. He corrected the narrative. He thanked him in front of the same cameras that had already judged him. And in that moment, the city watched 2 very different worlds collide. The story could have ended there. A handshake, a reward, a viral headline. But real change rarely comes that easily. Victor Langston requested a private meeting with Marcus days later, not for publicity, not for damage control, but because Amelia would not stop asking about him. Inside the Langston estate, a world Marcus had only seen from distant highways, He felt again the weight of difference. Marble floors, private security, generational wealth. Yet Amelia ran toward him without hesitation. Innocence did not recognize class or color. Victor had reviewed the full timeline. He saw how quickly suspicion replaced gratitude, how easily a rescuer became a criminal in the public eye. He could not undo that, but he could acknowledge it. Over the following months, something shifted in Crestview. Victor funded a community emergency response program in underserved neighborhoods, ensuring quicker medical intervention regardless of zip code. He launched a scholarship foundation in Marcus's wife's name after learning her story. And most unexpectedly, he offered Marcus a position overseeing community safety initiatives within his company, not as charity, but as recognition of judgment and courage under pressure. Marcus hesitated. Pride wrestled with opportunity. But he accepted, not for himself, but for Elijah. The city watched the transformation unfold. Not a fairy tale, but a reckoning, because what happened that day exposed something deeper than one misunderstanding. It revealed how quickly society assigns guilt based on appearance, how heroism can be questioned when it doesn't fit expectation, and how humanity can still break through systems built to divide. Years later, when Amelia spoke at a youth conference about compassion, she described a moment she learned what real courage looked like. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't power. It was a tired father who chose to stop when everyone else kept walking. Marcus never asked for recognition. He only asked himself one question that day. If it were my child, would I hope someone stops? And he did. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the quiet heroes we overlook every day, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in justice. Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to Black Voice Story for more powerful, truth-driven stories that challenge perspective and inspire change. Because sometimes the world changes not through power, but through one person who refuses to walk away.